2, 1.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the City of Beaufort Town of Port Royal Joint Council meeting hosted at the Town of Port Royal. Stephen, I would like to welcome you to the Town of Port Royal and your council members.
Yeah, Mayor DeVito, thank you for having us tonight. Thank you for feeding us. The food was absolutely delicious. I told Van, you feed us so well, I'd like to recommend maybe we do these meetings every month so we can come over here and have food. No, but in all seriousness, thanks for inviting us. I think this is important for us to get together from a regional standpoint to talk about issues that affect both of our jurisdictions, because as we know, stormwater doesn't know jurisdictional lines. Most residents don't know jurisdictional lines, and so it's important for us to continue to work together.
Yeah, I agree, and I know that these have been going on a long time, since before I was on council and before you were on council, and we're proud to keep these going, and I hope that they keep going in the future. Before we get too far into what we've got on our agenda, I would like to address Councilman Phil. This will be our last joint together.
Yes, it is.
2 terms, so you've been through a number of these. We skipped 1 or 2 during COVID, but we were able to get back together, and I thank you for always coming forward and being able to keep this communication line open. I'm sure all the council members would like to say something as well. Yes, you do. Sorry, I caught him with a cookie this morning.
We'll say good riddance, Daryl.
He's a former town manager.
That's right. You've been an inspiration, and we wish you well in your retirement.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service and dedication.
Appreciate it.
And I appreciate working with you over the years, especially with Cal Manager, Port Royal. I know Municipal Association now here, and
COB.
go to bigger. And COB, I work with you on COB,
Yeah,
too,
that's
so
right.
that's great.
Yeah.
So good luck. Enjoy that retirement.
Oh, don't worry.
Many writing. I started writing.
There you go. Both the manager, the city manager, and the town manager, thank you for keeping us organized.
Thank you.
And always getting these things scheduled, because I know it's not easy to bring this group together in any way. Herding squirrels is a good way to describe getting something to work out with all of our schedules.
Well, I do have a Phil Cromer story to tell.
Oh, gosh.
So, as you
Just one on my
know, as many of you know, Phil used to be town manager here, obviously. And now I can tell the story since Cynthia's retired. So we used to have some employees that like to misbehave at Public Works on Fridays. And Phil was always determined to catch them, but I don't think he ever could. And it's because Cynthia would call down there and let them know that she was on
Give him
the
a
line.
heads up.
Statute of limitations is run. It's been over 30 years.
Yeah.
So
He's on his way. I'm surprised they didn't have lights flashing and all that.
That's right.
That's it.
Oh, Natalia, that's new to the group. That's true. Natalia Laney is the new city clerk. Thank you. I got stuck town clerk in that way. She's joined us about 3 weeks, 4 weeks now. Somewhere in that area. She's local. She lives over on Ladies Island. I've known her for a number of years. We used to work together over at the Water Authority. So we're glad to have her on board, and you guys will get to know each other across the table as we keep planning those things. Thank you for reminding me of that. I appreciate that. So we got 4 items on the agenda. As we know, these are very casual meetings. These are just talking points of things that we feel like we need to discuss, and the first one is impact fees. And maybe we'll ask the managers to kind of brief us where we are on each side of the house, and then we can have a conversation with that.
yeah, I'll start. I think that over the last couple of weeks, town staff has been working with Eric and his folks, in particular Chuck Atkinson and Tom Kevaney, on revisions to the impact fees covering traffic, libraries, and recreation. Those were the 3 that we rolled them up into a kind of a final draft. And I talked to Tom Kevaney today about it. He said there probably were fewer drafts of the U.S. Constitution than there were of this document, but I think we're very close. And I think we've accommodated both of our concerns in the document. I think we're pretty close preparing to move those forward. We've given first reading, and I think y'all have as well. And Eric, where are y'all in the impact fee process in terms of reading?
Just for people online, Eric Greenway is in the back of the room, and that's who was asked the question. I told you to get to the table one way.
We held second reading until we could get the IGAs vetted out. So we're on hold for second reading. So it'll just be 2 additional readings once we get the IGA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Diller.
I think, as Van said, we are working with the same council between Port Royal and us to make things easier, what we wanted, and as the mayor said, we have so many things in common that, why not address these in common? And many of the things that I'll say this, for north of the Broad, we felt we still wanted to maintain calculating the fees, and collecting the fees, and then financially turning it over to the county quarterly or whatever is agreed. And the last draft, that was agreed, that was a concern we had, because south of the Broad, they bring it back. But so that was one of the big issues, and we just got last week, I think, the final calculations of what the fees would be for those three, as well as the latest capital for the library, the parks, and transportation. So we pretty much have everything we wanted, it's gone through, vetted it, and from a staff point of view, we're just waiting to get it to come back so we can then present it to council for them to review the changes we made. But most, say, 85–90% of what we wanted is in.
And Van, we're on board with the calculations as well?
Yes.
Under that scenario now? We were able to get, there was a little bit of concern, but we're there now.
Yeah, we got it resolved in the last.
Well, great, great. I'm glad that you were able to work through that. And I'll open it up for discussion on those three.
Yeah, I'll just add from a process standpoint, now that we've got the fee schedules and sort of the whole package to be able to talk about it as a cumulative program, I think we anticipate putting it on for a work session review here pretty soon. We've got kind of packed up agenda since we took a little time off for summer vacation, but hope to have a conversation with the public about the impacts of the fees and what they look like and the IGA. And if all that goes well, I anticipate we'll get it up for first reading here pretty soon.
Yeah, we're obviously not going to be able to do the September, but we would be looking for October as well.
Okay.
For them. Anybody else have anything that they want to add?
I'll just say I want to thank Chairman Passament because I think he heard our concerns about having the municipalities included and how funds were going to be released. And so that's been captured in the IGA. Our ability to continue to collect and remit to the county, I think, is protected and is business friendly. We did acquiesce on the administrative fee, which not super happy about, but because municipal projects are included, spirit of compromise, I think it was worth us moving forward. We still are not going to move the EMS impact fee forward, but we have, as of a couple of weeks ago, sort of proposed to Mr. Greenway and Mr. Passament that maybe, and some of you older timers would know this better, not old people, but longer tenured people. I understand that we did a public safety study 10 plus years ago before I was on council through ICMA, and you guys can probably speak to this better than I can, so I'll say what I know. Maybe we all work together to do a new study and to look at public safety in northern Beaufort County, and could it be delivered more efficiently? How could EMS maybe be embedded with fire service like it is in pretty much the rest of the county? And so we made that offer. I suspect we'll come back within the next month and continue that conversation, but we'd be willing to put a little money into that to move that forward, to at least have a objective analysis and a report to start the conversation about how we might be able to continue to deliver high quality service but get the best value for tax dollars.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I think you're right, because that's the final part of this conversation is with how do we move the EMS off a dead center, because that's really, in my mind, where it is right now. We haven't had enough conversations about it. I think it's a great way to start the process and move forward with that study, and I know the town will do its portion as well. Any thoughts on the EMS from any council members?
In fact, I was going to piggyback off of that also, but so has there been more discussion in regards to or relations to the EMS being housed at the fire departments?
That would be part, I think, of that discussion.
Let's discuss. I mean, we've got the joint chief here. Have you had any further discussions?
We continue to be open to those discussions. We haven't had any since the last time we met to talk about impact fees. I think once we settle the impact fees or get a moving forward direction in that, we can start opening back up to joint services and focus on what we can do better to serve both the town and the city.
Because you have personnel now that actually that work with the EMS, correct?
Yeah, but well, we provide an ILS, non-transport license now currently. We're moving to the ALS where we'll have paramedics on staff to be able to do those interventions on scene, but not necessarily transport. So we want to be able to combine that service with what Beaufort County has to offer and be able to add that transport service and whatever works best for both of our communities, whether it's them in our stations or us partnering with them in some other way.
I'd like to add, Joe, too, we've had a discussion with Mr. Greenway, and we have set up I'll call it an interim meeting between Reese, myself, Whitney, and Eric to say, let's talk about what's the scope of the work that we'd like. So I think we have a meeting towards the end of this month just to talk about that so we can keep moving this forward. Because again, this is the same company that we use, as you know, to say, okay, what's the proper location for our last station that we put in. So they know the area, they know what we had. So again, it's talking about getting that going, and we've agreed with the county, let's sit down and see
Can
what's
we
the
loop
next step.
Van into that?
Absolutely.
Loop in as part of the
Absolutely.
conversation?
Yep.
They can keep us briefed on it as well. I think it's a good way to move forward. Sorry to give you another task. so-
Thank you.
We're pretty much involved most of the time with it anyway together, so.
That's good. Anything else on impact fees? It's taken us a while to get to a point that we're all ready to take the next step. And I'm glad that we finally got there from where we all started from. Hearing nothing, affordable housing. Who would like to lead?
What is
Mayor?
that?
Yeah, so we've been attending the SoLoCo meetings in Bluffton and Hardyville. We have an IGA that our legal counsel's reviewed. We discussed it in work session, 2 weeks ago? 2 Tuesdays ago, I guess. I think it's in a place where, personally, I'm comfortable with it. There, we talked about it in our work session. There is a little bit of faith, that we have to extend. I draw a comparison to the Economic Development Corp, where there's no long-term contract. There was no real funding commitments up front. We were very diligent about setting the goals and the metrics and how we were going to be successful, and it's worked. Knock on wood, for 5 years now, over $250 million of capital investment countywide, almost 1,000 jobs at 40% higher than the city of Beaufort's per capita income, $47,000. You probably saw in the paper last week, we've got a Japanese flying car company that's locating in the region. That's pretty cool.
It's interesting.
So housing on the other side, I'll just be candid. I feel like we're putting a whole lot of money in without really working out the goals and working out the metrics for success. But I do think the issue is important enough, and there's enough good faith with all the stakeholders. And the IGA is crafted in such a way where the governing body, the governing structure that will stand up with each of our appointees, everybody has a fair footing at the table.
Yeah.
It's going to be incumbent on us appointing people who really understand housing, who understand structuring and setting up fair and balanced, essentially nonprofits or governing structures, with the goal of how do we induce things coming out of the ground as quickly as possible. And so, me, I like to meddle, I like to toy with the things. So if I had my way, I'd go in there, I'd fine tune a few more things. But I do think it's in a spot where it's ready to, it's worth some good faith, it's worth the vote, it's worth us putting some public money in to see if it can really solve some problems for us in that affordable workforce housing space.
I agree. It's at the point now, like you said, you always want to do a little bit more, but there's too many cooks in this one, and we need to get that final document and move forward. I think it's important we do this one unified as well. So I'd love to find, really communicate well, that it's time to move it forward and get it on our agendas almost simultaneously. Our meetings don't line up that well, but if you're doing it this month, are you thinking you're going to do it this month?
I think so. Our legal counsel had
It's on work session for next week.
Okay, so our legal counsel had an issue about procurement. I think that's been resolved, so I want to thank Tammy at Community Works for getting me those documents pretty quick, and Mr. Greenway for his responsiveness. I just got a copy. There's an agreement between Community Works and the county. We just forwarded that, I think, last week. We've not had a chance to review that. You guys probably need to be privy to that as well.
I have not seen that.
Because, again, I'm appreciative of the county managing the relationship But I do think since they will be the arm of this organization that we're all putting significant amount of public money into, understanding how it will all be managed, I think is important for all of us before we sign off on it. I also understand Community Works has already hired the staff member who would be sort of working in Beaufort County, a guy named Brad Mole, who ran for Congress, worked in Bluffton for housing. That's about all I know about him. So things are moving.
Dan, can you get a copy of that agreement?
Sure.
I doubt there'll be enough time to discuss it tomorrow night, but maybe if we get it in time, we can talk about it.
Gentlemen, if you don't, Alice has been a real leader on that initiative. Is Wendy's. If there's anything that y'all would like to add?
Yeah.
Well,
I would really like to thank
Wendy.
Wendy, come on up to the mic so that the
Can't hear
people,
you. Everybody on
We got
Facebook,
you too.
we're live.
teach you to come to the meeting.
I would really like to thank you for being willing to take the giant leap, because I know that that's uncomfortable, but it is what it takes. The person working for Community Works the office will be in Beaufort, so that person will be a local person available to all 8 jurisdictions. And I'm really anxious to get something built just as you are too. It's a great investment in economic development. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you, Wendy.
I'll just also add that this isn't a pay and pray initiative, right? I don't think we're just going to be able to write a check and then housing is going to reign in each of our jurisdictions.
Right.
It's still going to require work on our parts. And so for the city, for example, I think we've really got to take a hard look at our permitting and our regulatory process. You know, when we went to Charleston back in October, if it's a workforce affordable housing, it's a red sticker. It gets in and out of there in 30 days. They reduce the permit fees. That's something I think we can do better internally. I think looking at the impact fee structures and being able to waive that's captured in the IGA, but coming up with that pot of money to replace the impact fee waivers, looking at our zoning that make sure that we're putting in more missing middle housing types, you know, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes that fit the scale of existing neighborhoods and some of our zoning classes that we currently don't allow. There's a number of, I think, tools that we have to work on as individual jurisdictions, just as we have with Economic Development Corp., right? Mm-hmm. We've seen a lot of success in the city with the Economic Development Corp. because a previous council took a very big political risk and got hammered for it for buying a commerce park. We know we spent $1.8 million. We thought the thing was ready to go. Then we go in and find out, Bill, that it's got copper internet with barely 3 megs. It's got roads that look like they were in 1987 Beirut. And we've spent a pile of money to get the Commerce Park ready before we've started to see some success. But because we've been working in tandem with the Economic Development Corp. and we've also got continued skin in the game, we're seeing those results. And I think housing is the same way. We've got to keep individually, while we also work jointly with this group, if we're really going to be successful in moving the needle in the workforce affordable housing space.
You're right, and what we learned through this whole process and what we heard when we went to Charleston as well is density is one of the keys, and that's where we need to be looking at our zoning and say what makes sense and where in that aspect. And I think this is certainly not one of those things that we just take a vote, move on, and put it on a shelf. We're going to have to stay active and involved. And it is a regional effort, and we'll have to remember where it gets built, and we've got to make sure we can free up some time to get it built in our own areas as well. Kevin, I know you were concerned about the leap of faith. I think we finally got to the point that we're, you and I've had some conversations about that. I think we're all getting to that point. I want you to be able to voice your thoughts.
No, all questions have been answered, so like I said.
And it's good, it's finally.
Leap of faith is a good way to describe it.
It's a good way to describe it.
But I think you're correct, it's important, so.
And I also think we met with our Beaufort Housing Authority folks last week. The city has 3 appointments on that board. All 3 of those appointments are up. One has resigned. So we're looking at those appointments. We'll be talking as a council here in the next few weeks about what the future holds. Talk about Charleston, how they're doing the repositioning. I still think that holds a tremendous amount of opportunity for us in expanding capacity at that sort of low 60, 30% income level. So that's something I think we ought to work on together too in the future.
Greenville has always been also been a model do this. You know, they acquired properties and so forth, and they designated it specifically for the use of building affordable housing. And definitely in our areas, in our municipality, workforce housing and affordable housing is definitely a challenge. We too had a presentation by the Beaufort Housing Authority a few months back here, and they expressed the shortage of housing and the urgency for housing needs here across the county. And that has been something that's been in discussion for years. I formally attended all of those local meetings, and I missed the last one, a couple actually, but you know, I look at the open land trust and so forth, you know, monies that's been allocated and designated to acquire certain properties and so forth, but nothing has been set aside to consider the workforce and affordability for people to live in. You know, I did some research within the last week, and I think on average, a one-bedroom is $1,600, and a two-bedroom is $2,100. That's definitely not affordable housing. And they said for a person making $49,000 and $50,000, what range monthly payment should that person look for when they're making a rent? $1,200. How many people are actually making $50,000? And how many facilities are offering services at the $1,200? So that's definitely something that is warranted and needed and looked at. And I use Greenville because I know Greenville, they have allocated certain properties that they bought solely for construction of affordable housing. And I know we had this discussion, and I'll be finished also. We have a plethora of new multi-unit complexes that's being built across our area and the county. And I know we cannot dictate to the developers what the use is, but it would be nice also if we could have some dialogue with those people also, that they can designate a certain percentage of those units to be workforce affordable housing.
Yeah, I think that's the zoning piece that Stephen's talking about, is going back and looking at those and seeing how we can.
Yeah, Daryl, you're exactly right, and I think, you know, for a long time we kind of look at initiatives in the county or in our jurisdictions as sort of the silver bullet mentality, and so I think it's $140 million of land that we've taken off the tax rolls. And that was always part of my complaint about economic development. I've voted for every rural and critical lands referendum. I'm a tremendous supporter of land preservation. But if we're going to say we're taking, you know, this land over here off the tax rolls, then I think we have to have a balanced program to say, well, this land over here, we're going to try to get the highest and best value out of it that we can. And I'll, you know, maybe dovetail into something else, but I think it's germane to housing is, you know, in November, the county's going to ask voters to create a pool of $100 million to go do green space and preservation, development, you know, buy down development rights, outright buy stuff, pay off debt on other old land. But there are consequences to taking $100 million worth of land off the tax rolls.
Because it's more than what's the multiplier in the vertical piece that would not happen. So, you know, that's something to contemplate as well.
And as much as, you know, folks don't want to hear it, because I think a lot of us have anxiety about how we're growing, to me, housing is a matter of supply and demand. It's that old, you know, economics 101, that prices go up because we don't have enough capacity to meet the demand of people moving here.
Right.
So we've got to find creative ways to add more supply to be able to stabilize that pricing. And so I have a real concern that under a very noble goal of slowing growth and trying to guide it in the right area, you know, it's squeezing a balloon, right? We'll fix this one problem, but it's going to squeeze out in these other places. Not to mention just us giving away millions and millions of dollars of transportation infrastructure dollars at the state and federal level, but that's a whole other frustration of mine.
Just also to build on what Daryl, we met with Beaufort Housing last week. Your point, they have 1,400 people on a waiting list.
1,400 on a waiting list.
On a waiting list.
And they only open the enrollment period for a week or two?
Right.
It's less than a week.
It's less than a week. You put your application in, and then they close the thing. So I argue that 1,400 is not an accurate indicator of the need.
And to Daryl's point about the rents, a lot of the rents that Beaufort Housing Authority are affording working people that are able to qualify are $800. So they're getting down towards that 60% AMI versus what we're talking about is the 100 and 120% AMI people. So there's a lot of people that need low rents.
There were only 2 places 3 or 4 weeks ago in downtown Port Royal available for rent. $2,500 a month and $3,300 a month.
It's sad because our own people that work in our towns, they have no place to live. They have to live in Hardyville, Ridgeland,
Or have
places like
roommates.
that.
Or
And
multiple
then they end
roommates.
up leaving because they don't want the drive every day.
Right.
So we have to sit down and put our pens together because we have got to do something about this.
I'm a big believer in buying the land because you keep it affordable. A lot of these new LIHTC, these low-income housing tax credit developers come in, 15, 20 years, and then they flip it to market. That's something you try to avoid.
Yeah.
And either you have to put something in there that says that the city has the first right of refusal to buy that property, but it makes more sense to go ahead and buy the land up front and have it located where they have access to transportation, have access to shopping and all that kind of.
I agree.
Interesting to see what Beagle does over there.
Under Councilman Cromer's leadership, he led an affordable housing task force right before the pandemic. And so we've got 20 plus recommendations.
24 recommendations. Y'all are welcome to look at them.
Yeah, we'd love to look at it.
To see it.
We'll shoot that over to you.
Yeah, we'd love to look at that. And if anybody saw, there was a live council meeting today from Hilton Head on the same subject.
Yeah.
I got a chance to watch about 40 minutes of it, and it was the same conversations that we're having. They're pretty committed to trying to find land and buy land, and there's a lot of conversation over the land, some of the land they'd been looking at. They found out was restricted, and they couldn't even do what they wanted to do, so they had to back off and look at other pieces of property. It always becomes concerning when realtors know that we're out to look for land for certain things, in that aspect as well. I think I'm glad that, the A and B, think about it, the impact fees and the Affordable Housing Trust are two projects that we've been working on a long time, and they're both going to come to second readings right about the same time, which I think is really great that the county was willing to hear us, and we were willing to talk and get together and get these both to that point. But just like you said, Stephen, we got to keep working the housing trust. We got to pick the right people. I know who I would have chosen, but I lost my member. I have to find a new appointee. So you get appointed by.
But yeah, so the Housing Trust is going to need an appointee from each of our jurisdictions. The Housing Authority is going to require, 3 appointees for the city. I don't know where Hilton Head's appointee, if it's up, she's up for, reappointment. And then it seems like there was one other area we needed to be.
We don't have anybody
Thinking
in the
about
housing
together.
trust.
Drawing a blank.
Good housing, yeah. Okay.
Now, I guess the trust and the Housing Authority would be the two priorities. So if you know any, and I don't think it has a residency requirement for us, for
Okay.
our appointments. So if you know of anybody who's, again,
Yeah.
got a background in housing, please send them our way.
Well, thank you for that offering. We'll take a look around and talk to her. See if we can't find, you got somebody, maybe?
We'll see.
See if we can't find somebody and give you a recommendation. We appreciate that.
And for us, it's about making that diversity on the board. In terms, I think they need some finance, they need some development background, probably need some legal assistance. So trying to find a full complement of, by their bylaws, they have to have a resident member that's voted on by the residents. So there is a voice of what's going on in terms of the management and existing inventory. So surrounding that person with folks who know how to go through a pile of government bureaucracy as they work through the repositioning, and then work with the private development community to expand capacity would be the goals.
Mayor, I think that's a good point on that everybody needs to clearly understand what is on the table for Beaufort Housing Authority to be able to do, and that's the repositioning of their inventory and create potential density where they didn't have it. So we all know where they exist in our communities. It's the duplexes and quadplexes, and some of them are actually single-family homes. They have the opportunity with federal assistance now and oversight to be able to redevelop those into keeping them affordable housing and putting more density on the lots they already have, if their zoning underlying allows it. So they need some rock star board members.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a heavy lift for that organization, who historically has been decent at management and maintenance and finding the Section 8 vouchers and connecting folks through that program. In terms of dramatically expanding their inventory, that's not something they've had a history of doing. So it's about bringing a different capability of board members, I think.
And redeveloping the current inventory of properties.
Absolutely.
I think, we have a large piece here, I think could be better utilized.
Yeah, they have approximately 300 units countywide under their management. A number of those units, I think, have lived their service, useful life. The densities, to Reese's point, in many of those zoning areas could be dramatically expanded.
Yep.
To Phil's point, working through the housing authority keeps it in the public trust forevermore, so you don't get into this spot where developers get tax credits and then 15 years they kick everybody out, which you just saw in one of our neighboring jurisdictions in the last few weeks. And it switches the market rate, and then we start over again. That's not helpful. So for us to find ways to keep things in the public trust, expand capacity, bring stuff up to new design standards, build mixed income developments instead of stigmatized sort of all 30% AMIs. It needs to be a range. So I'm pretty excited. I think there's a lot of momentum in this space, rightfully so. We just got to keep our foot on the gas.
Anything else on the housing? And now we'll switch to something we're all looking forward to. Billing for our garbage services.
Wait, we heard you pulled some strings and we're all good.
We're all good? Yeah, we're all good.
Something with
Reached out to my own-
Garbage string bag.
Yeah. So just so that the people watching understand what we're talking about, since the mergers of both of our utility systems with Beaufort Jasper Water and Sewer Authority, part of those merger agreements was that the Water Authority would do the billing for garbage services. That has run its course, and the Water Authority leadership has notified both jurisdictions that they will end billing. What's the date we received? It's a little bit
23 somewhere.
It's the end of the year.
End of.
Yeah, basically January of 23.
Okay. So we both have to come up with ways of billing that services. We don't have a financial package that we currently own that would allow us to even say that we're going to do it in-house. I know that you use a product that you may or may not. I didn't know where you were on that. And this is kind of a town manager kind of start this conversation.
Where we were, as you said, notified for several reasons. They're doing, one, they're changing, Beaufort Jasper, changing their financial system internal anyway. And it's not going to be allowing for billing on something that they don't do. So we started looking at what are the different options. One, do it in-house. Two, could we put it through taxes? And three, having to do it ourselves. We talking to, because now we have two different carriers. We've talked to our carrier, which is Capital Waste, and they are working with us to do the billing. That takes the risk of the credit, that also covers the cost of credit cards, et cetera. So we've been working with them, and we're trying to get information now, both with our finance people and Beaufort Jaspers. What do we need? What's the billing addresses? What types of things? We gave a public announcement at our last meeting that this is coming, because in our case, and using round numbers, that people now automatically get billed $20 with their water bill every month, that they're going to see that cease in January or February, and they'll see a new bill coming from Capital. It's not an additional, one's going to balance the other, but we know it's going to be a communications nightmare, and et cetera. So we've got to start now, and we wish there was a better way. None of us wanted this change to happen. As you said earlier, it's just another task that neither Van nor I really wanted to pick up. And when you look at it, the cost of taking and servicing 5,000 or 6,000 accounts in the city's case, and then doing the collection, and why I'm not paying, and the write-offs, and who's in apartment 3B versus apartment 3A. So with Capital Waste, and all we know is they do the billing in several other communities that they are. So that is the road that we're working on right now.
It'll be a direct billing.
Direct billing.
Yeah, I thought that was probably going to end up being the best option.
And where are we on that?
Because, because we just got a letter like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. You got ours.
So yeah, that's one of the options that obviously we should consider, because realistically, they have there's always been this little bit of insulation with the billing through Beaufort Jasper in terms of who's paying for service, who didn't, who's moved out, who hasn't, and honestly, with the technology they have on these trucks, there's absolutely no reason why they can't have a really good correlation between the billing and what they're actually seeing on the street, because that makes the most sense. So,
Ultimately, that's what we're doing right now is
Yeah.
auditing the databases to make sure that it's accurate. And we've suspected for some time that there have been maybe some deficiencies, and we're optimistic that it's all going to get squared away in the next coming months so that everybody's appropriately getting billed. One of the things that we found was that we had to make sure where there was multiple tenants in a single unit that billing was accounted for, and that was one of the biggest obstacles to getting it onto a fee based on the tax bill, much like a stormwater bill.
Right.
Was to make sure that every person that was receiving service or household was appropriately billed, and then and that's why we landed at Capital Waste. That they are our provider now, and they were most well positioned to be able to provide the billing.
One of the other things that we've done that, I know you can't do this, but we wanted to double check. We've contacted Dominion because when we did Boundary Street, we put a fee in for the undergrounding to all the residents. So we got their list of every address. So we are comparing that to our trash, just to say, okay, are we missing any? Because if someone's paying that fee, it's an address that we have. So we're double, because we feel exactly as Van said, that probably we're going to be picking up some that haven't been billed, and we know there are some that have not 2 cans, not 4 cans, but 6 or 8 cans.
Right.
And they're also the ones that call many times to complain that they didn't get something because it was left in the wrong place or whatever. But anyway, it's going to be a process, and it's going to take us 3 to 6 months afterwards to balance it out, because people just are not going to understand that they're getting a new bill.
Yeah, they think it's a new fee.
And it's going to be that they got a tax increase, and it's not. So it's a huge communication thing that we want to start working on right away.
You pulled that thought right out of my head just now, because I was going to say, next to Beaufort Jasper Water Authority, the only other place that can tell you accurately who's in the what dwelling is Dominion. Because, you have the A and the B, because you have to apply for services.
Right.
And so next to that, but how would Capital know that information? But you said, you shared also, so Dominion was willing to share that information publicly, so that's good. And then with Capital Service or any other contractor services, so that's going to have, if you decide if that contract expires, then that's going to have to be a negotiation with a new company, and they may have to acquire the software to actually initiate that type of billing.
It almost ends up becoming a franchise of sorts. And I think that Hilton had used to do something like that, with more of a direct billing, and then they were so large, they had several different contractors depending upon the area.
We're functionally in that situation with
Yeah.
Capital right now. They are not doing this for free, and so that will slightly change the math, but
Yeah.
it's still favorable to the city, and I would be confident you'd find
Yeah,
the
but we're
same.
providing them with the information.
We got to get started on that. We've talked in the past, I remember one of my first joint meetings is, do we try to align the contracts? And this may be the catalyst to say we finally have to do it. I know one of the biggest issues with that is the differences in the way we do pickups. Because your contract has landscape material, yard waste, and ours would not, because we pick that up on this end. But I got to believe there's a way to do this, and start talking about, I don't know whose contract comes up first.
Ours will
Theirs.
I think
Yeah.
yours will, right?
Theirs, because we just renewed
Yeah.
ours.
Remember, we were
But we
close
shouldn't let
to
that-
have the same provider, because
Yeah.
Waste Pro was almost purchased by Capital, but then.
Right, and I can't figure out where our
Yeah.
contract, because it was almost purchased and
Yeah.
not purchased and rescinded, and I didn't know if a contract reset or didn't reset in that.
We shouldn't let the yard waste be a barrier to good quality discussion, though. I think we can all
I think we can
benefit
figure that
from
one out.
something
I
there.
think we need, this is a good reason why we need to talk.
Bulk.
We need
have
both
that too.
staffs to really have that
We
conversation.
did raise the question with Capital to say, okay, if Port Royal or whatever, they come in, is there further savings? And they said they definitely would look at that, because it's further. I'm not selling their service, but
No.
whatever, as we know with fire service, whatever we can consolidate that
It's a
works
benefit.
for all of us. As Reese says, maybe we have to tweak the landfill pick, or not the landfill, but the.
Yard waste.
Yard waste.
Yard waste.
pickup, or whatever, so it is something that we do want to work together.
Like I said, they know exactly where they are and which does have yard and which wouldn't have yard waste in that way.
I get a few phone calls a week where I don't think our residents think that the garbage people know exactly where they are.
You get those calls, you're right.
I've got a question on the collection of the fees. Is there possible, once we get to that point, to have like at City Hall or Digital Court or somewhere where a drop box where the people can be able to deposit it instead of having to do it online or mail it?
I would think so, but that's something.
I mean, that's down the road, that goes beyond the collection, that means beyond the billing.
A lot more work now.
And Neil, that conversation is interesting that you even bring that up, because I remember when the drop box was removed from City Hall for the Water Authority payments. And there was a little bit of an uproar about that, but it was just, it became very difficult to manage, and the drop box was removed. And there was one here too when we first merged as well. And then this one was removed also.
Well, didn't Dominion just remove in-person payments too?
Yes.
I think they just closed it as
They
well.
closed their cashier, that's right. So
Yeah.
that's just getting harder and harder.
Not
Remember,
saying
I used
one
to
way
pay
or
my
another.
power bill at the Piggly Wiggly.
What's that?
You just pay,
Pay power
the SE&G bill, you could pay at the Piggly Wiggly.
In-stamp.
Whatever, however you could.
Piggly Wiggly
Walgreens
stamps
does
are
Yeah.
it
worse.
in Florida.
I went somewhere the other day and
Yeah, I used to love
small
in-stamp.
amount I went to pay for cash. The cashier had no idea how to give me change. Really had no idea. It was interesting.
You're supposed to press the button and it tells them.
Yeah, I told them too late, that it was gonna be cash, so they got caught. Well, I think ultimately out of this conversation, I'd really like both staffs to work together to see if we can't see that the joint service model is an
I'll be
advantage.
quite honest with you, if, we're going to obviously discuss direct billing with Waste Pro, but if they do not have that capability, then we may need to explore our options within the contract and then maybe contemplate
Yeah,
some sort of partnership. So,
Yeah, because I think we've been happy with Capital since we switched.
Yeah, I have.
We get complaints from time to time.
yeah.
Every
Really?
once in
You
a while,
get
the thing
garbage
squishes
complaints
the
there?
can too.
Well, you pick up 6,000 plus doors a week.
Yep.
Oh, they drop
Bound
inside, yeah.
to happen and throw in a pile of rain and yard debris and
yep.
merchants who are really busy downtown and have more cardboard than they historically have had. I've learned a lot about solid waste pickup since being mayor in the last 2
Yes,
years.
yeah, absolutely.
Is your commercial and residential the same, or is it just residential
It
franchise?
depends. Like some small commercial, we pick up through the contract, others we just, got to go dumpster, got to do whatever.
They get their own.
Yeah.
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 You still give out those really great heavy-duty bags? I used to steal those from my grandmother.
Yeah, they're up there, $20 a box now.
They used to be 13.
Still a deal.
Yeah.
You still have them?
Yeah.
They're great big.
Can city residents buy them too?
We sell to.
Those are great bags, too.
Mostly non-residents, to be quite honest with you.
When I first moved
The people that still know they're here.
Yeah, they still know they're here.
Great
They're
bags.
massive.
Well, that's another place for opportunity for everybody, is there's always been a quiet conversation about franchising the entirety of the pickup into the municipalities for commercial and residential, but that's a big lift. But if we're going to do it together, it'd be much easier than what we are currently facing.
Yep.
And just do it as a franchise instead. That's a conversation that
Because right
we
now,
need to have.
the commercial customers in the city go out and ascertain their own service.
That's where you can have 6 trucks the same day going down.
Yeah.
Same
picking
road.
up different ones all the time, so.
Or if you happen to live on a road that's multiple passes like me, I see them go
Can't you
both
ask
ways.
Still the vacuum
them to put it
truck?
on their bill for us?
We don't have the vacuum truck
For
anymore.
Dominion.
Now,
yes.
sand,
That's cool.
sand keeps those things alive.
Yep, that's a tough, those blowers are a tough product to keep up and running. All right, well, I think we got a path forward, and that's what I think is important. I'd love to see those contracts come together in that way. Last item, Metropolitan Planning Commission and the Northern Regional Implementation Committee. Mayor, you and I have had some conversations about this, and, I guess I have probably the most history sitting around this table about that. I was on the original Northern Regional Planning Committee, which ended up with the document that was approved and created the Northern Regional Implementation Committee. Chaired it a number of times because we passed that chair back and forth on who was the planning commissioner whether at the beginning it was the Joint Planning Commission, then it rolled to the MPC. Once we got it, and then the County Planning Commission, we shared that chairmanship role and switched it back and forth a number of times over the years. Northern Regional implementation, it has gotten a little stagnant, hard to get an agenda, hard to get a quorum for an agenda. I said that backwards, hard to get a quorum for an agenda. And then the Metropolitan Planning Commission, just what's your feelings? What are you thinking?
Well, my feelings are as firm as warm jello on the subject, so I want to put that disclaimer out there. But
is that a Southern firm, is warm jello?
That came from
Mike, you got that one? You wrote that one down?
Well,
you've heard that one before.
I got to give Rob Bridgers from leadership, Colonel Bridgers. He's the one that I stole that from. So
okay.
I'll
You can do that one in my leadership.
Firm as warm jello to him.
Did you remember that one?
No. We've had a hard time getting a quorum. I felt like we go to these 2-hour meetings on the Friday a month. And, I love seeing everybody's smiling faces when you show up, but we haven't really been accomplishing very much. Conversely, SoLoco, who was formed, they just celebrated their 5-year anniversary, is the, 8 entities or 7 entities, Jasper County. Hampton. You got, Jasper, Ridgeland. You got all the southern jurisdictions, and then you got Yamasee, right? So Yamasee is a formal member of SoLoco,
which is really west of the Broad.
And the only 2 jurisdictions that are left out are the city of Beaufort and the town of Port Royal. And
we're actually in southern Beaufort County.
The town of Port Royal.
Yeah, the town of Port Royal is. Yeah, because you go across the Lemon Island, right?
Yeah.
So, and frankly, I've been really impressed with SoLoco's leadership because they're not like. There was no huge plan. There was no formal, everybody got around town and voted. They just started showing up and going to a meeting, and they dragged their staffs there. And in the 5 years, 2 really big priorities have come out of that group: the regional stormwater standards, which we just adopted, because I said it in the opening. Stormwater doesn't understand jurisdictions, right? It flows where it wants, and the housing trust. I also think that the mayors, we talk and we get along pretty well. All the management gets along and talks pretty well, and I hope it always stays that way. But right now, while everybody's sort of getting along, I've kind of taken a little bit of liberty and asked SoLoco if they would include the town and the city as formal members of SoLoco.
Right.
And so
and he had my permission to ask for the town. You didn't.
I did. We talked about it.
You didn't go that far out.
Yeah. So it's on their agenda in a couple of weeks. Because if you think about it, we have individual issues. So economic development, housing, transportation. We have mechanisms to have those regional conversations in those specific areas. But we really don't have a body or a mechanism to get everybody in the room together to talk about these broader regional priorities with electeds and our staff leadership. And just as we grow, what happens in Hardeeville is increasingly going to affect what happens in the town and in the city. So, again, I make this argument that right now, while things are good, everybody's sort of getting along, we have a number of really important regional issues we need to be talking about and moving forward initiatives. Now's the time for us to all be in the tent together. Ms. Howard?
You forgot one important entity, the school district comes to the Northern Regional Plan.
Yeah, the school district. So, the school district probably ought to be included. Well, they don't come, but if you read SoLoco's mission statement, it talks about education and higher education, the school district. It talks about all of those things. So, in talking with Mayor Williams, I think their next couple of meetings, they're really talking about the next sort of phase of SoLoco now that they're 5 years. And so maybe there's a conversation with making sure that the school district is embodied. So this is where the warm jello part comes in because, we all go to a lot of meetings. And so I'd also argue if we're all going to SoLoco and talking about regional priorities there, do we still need to have a Northern Regional Plan meeting? Maybe not. I just recently read through the Northern Regional Plan again. It's still a timeless document that I think has a lot of good information in it that we probably all ought to review at some point and sort of recommit ourselves to what it says, especially around growth boundaries and land present. Northern Beaufort County said we were going to preserve 60% of the land in Northern Beaufort County. We were going to keep it rural, right? Versus Southern Beaufort County, that's basically said we're not going to be rural. Southern Beaufort County is going to be developed. It's going to be an urban center. Certainly there'll be green space. So two completely different philosophies of land use. But that informs a lot of the stuff we do around annexations and around zoning and transportation infrastructure and where we put housing. So I might make an argument that the NERPIC committee is still important for us to come and talk about something that's very different than what Southern Beaufort County is going to look like. So that's why I just wanted to put it on the agenda for us to kind of spitball it out, to talk about the pros and cons of inclusion in SoloCo, and then, do we disband the implementation committee? If we keep it, how do we reinvigorate it so that we're just not going to a meeting and talking to each other once a month or struggling to get a quorum?
Right, and the MPC, the Metropolitan Planning Commission, came out of the Northern Regional Plan.
Right.
The idea being that it allowed the growth boundary issue to be discussed in a much broader fashion if annexations were coming forward, as projects were coming forward, in that aspect. And does that still hold true? Is that still what needs to be there? Everybody knows what my feelings about the MPC, only because I chaired it from day one till when I finally decided that I had to get off because I was term limited beyond 3 years. And it was one of those simple clauses, the Town of Port Royal Council, or until replaced. They just never got around to replacing me for a little while.
Hey,
that was
you were
fine.
doing a job.
I love doing it
you
in that aspect. So, thoughts on that? I mean, is it, do we keep that running the way it is? Is it time for that to be discussed in a different way? I mean, I'm certainly not looking forward to standing up another standalone committee.
Well, you and I have talked about that too. And so this is another warm jello comment. On one hand, having a regional planning body with all three jurisdictions in the room with appointees from each, I understand the value of that conversation, right? And understanding how, the decision the city makes might have an effect on the town or the unincorporated county. On the other hand, we've got a body which, when we created our form-based code, our Beaufort Code, we gave that body a significant amount of additional authority over what it had previously, right? And so there are things that the city brings to that body that the town and the county don't bring to that body. And those decisions dramatically affect what gets built in the city and how it gets built and where it gets built. And so it's given me heartburn that we've essentially politically abdicated the majority of influence on that body to appointees that we have no control over, right? At the same time as we've put in a very prescriptive code, right, that's frustrated all involved and that needs some tuning. We put in a very prescriptive code that's going to be very unique to the city of Beaufort. So I have two issues where we've abdicated authority to a majority of people, which voters elected us to be responsible for the future of the city, right? But I've watched the body, and no offense to the appointees, but I've seen appointees from other jurisdictions make decisions that aren't in spirit with our civic master plan or our Beaufort Code, and that frustrates the hell out of me. The other issue is that as we have prescriptive codes, and we should be developing a little differently, right? The town of Port Royal is going to look a little different than the city of Beaufort. The unincorporated county should look a lot different than the city or the town, right? That's not wrong. That's good land use. And I think one of the things that makes us really cool and special. But you've got 6 appointees sitting up there, and we're asking those volunteers to be experts in all 3 codes. And I mean, I passed our code, I've read our code, we deal with code issues all day, and I'm not an expert in our code, right? It is a difficult document. And so to ask these volunteers to really understand the nuances of all 3 is a big, big lift. And so when we're trying to be very careful about what comes out of the ground and to make sure that it respects the neighbors, that it's Beaufort authentic, that it fits, right? It doesn't cause all kind of other issues. Does it make better sense for us to have all of our appointees that we have control over that can really be experts in the code that they're administering? And again, I haven't, there's pros and cons.
Right, so I go back to the original first time the meeting was brought together, the MPC, when we first decided to be an MPC, because this was a conversation we had. We had 3 codes that we had to understand, and those codes have changed. And, the reality of those 3 codes it took a strong staff to present to the MPC to make sure, and we always had to know exactly whose code we were looking at and ask the appropriate questions. And one of my goals as the Senate Chair for a lot of those years was anybody not knowing should not be able to tell where you came from if you're sitting on this board or commission. Okay, that was something that I told all the commissioners many, many times. When we deliberate these, nobody should know whether I'm from Port Royal, Beaufort County, or the city of Beaufort, no matter where the project's from. I mean, obviously people will know that, but that's not the way you should come across or should do that. It's got to be specific to the code. And it is a big lift. It was a lot to ask people, and there was a lot of phone calls that had to be made and conversations with planning directors to say, remind me of what that section is and make sure that that's in the packet so that we know exactly what that is. And I understand your concerns. I think there's a lot of conversation that needs to be had from here if we're going to decide that it's time to do something different again. I mean, status quo is not always the best thing. I mean, we got to where we are, and I can go way back. And anybody else in the room could go back and forth, I don't know. We go all the way back to the original City of Beaufort Planning Commission, and I remember with that, and it was Beaufort County, and I sat on that with Tim Rentz, and then there was the supervisors planning team here in the town of Port Royal, which really wasn't a planning commission, where we literally walked down the streets to the projects and stood in front of the lots and made decisions in that way and what was going to go. And then we went to a joint planning commission, and then that morphed into the Metropolitan Planning Commission. And they've all had really good successes. They've all had issues. I mean, that's just the reality. Remember, they are voluntary boards. We ask these people to do a lot. And I was proud to do that for many, many, many years. And if it's time to change again, then I think we really need to have that conversation and think where it goes. So I think we all need to be involved in that. One of the things about the MPC that made it work, and even I had, was part of writing the ordinances and participated in those ordinances back then, is that the MPC made a recommendation directly to councils on our side, on the metropolitan side, but not on the county side. No matter what happens at the MPC for a county project, it always goes back to their own planning commission. And there was that little bit of disconnect, but it was never an issue. It always worked out. And honestly, you can probably count on both my hands of how many projects I can't even think, it's in 12 years, I think, that the commission's been around. I'm trying to remember my timeline. There's probably been less than 10 projects that came before the MPC from the county. It's not been a lot of projects. The biggest thing that came before the MPC from the county in the beginning was obviously the ACUS, and those sections came in those areas. So is there a way to do something that's strictly municipal members, yet still stay involved with the county when those bigger regional issues, and then yet goes back to the Northern Regional Plan? And is that the right group to take those regionals rather than the MPCs?
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to make any fast decisions. I just, watching the MPC over the last year or so, putting in our code, in 18, late 18, seeing sort of the challenges of this prescriptive code, working with the development industry to shape projects. It's something that's been sort of bugging me. So at least I want us to have the conversation and sort of keep talking about it. Because if not separating or going back to municipal planning commission, I definitely think, regardless of the model, there is a need for additional training.
Yes.
And professional development of the appointees, and maybe even vetting of appointees to make sure that they have, the backgrounds we're looking for. Like we talked with the housing authority, let's work together as a group between the county, the town, and the city to make sure we've got some diversity on that board that really respects all of the jurisdictions.
Well, I think let's start and see if we can't pull out the original ordinance that created the MPCs. And that way share it with our council and let everybody get the history of what was written in there. And let's keep this conversation going, because I get it. I understand it.
And I'll say again, I do think there needs to be a reaffirmation of, or at least a review of the Northern Regional Plan. I think we've got a lot of new leaders around the table, myself included, who wasn't a part of the the bloodletting of growth boundaries and the annexation wars of the, 90s and 2000s. I hear it was very controversial. I guess Weston Newton recently described the Northern Regional Plan as more of a treaty than a plan.
I would agree with that.
But again, after reviewing the thing, kudos to all that were involved in that thing, because I think it was a very progressive document that said, we are going to be, 60% rural. We are going to develop in our urban centers. We are going to try to reduce car trips. It's a lot of the stuff that we're still trying to achieve today. And, understanding why annexations. We recently had an issue with an annexation. And the MPC, the body, a number of the members wanted to debate the annexation, even though it was clearly a donut hole. It was clearly within the growth boundaries. And my opinion is that annexations within the growth boundaries are not up for discussion. Right? Now, what is up for discussion is the zoning. And that's where we ought to be having a thoughtful debate about what is the zoning when it comes into a municipality, and does it respect the neighbors? Does it help us achieve our goals? With the annexations, I don't think we ought to be having controversy or even be, thinking about whether or not they should be accepted or not, as long as they're within the growth boundaries, especially if they're a donut hole within the jurisdictions.
You're absolutely right. And if you read the Northern Regional Plan, the section in the Northern Regional Plan that talks specifically about any projects within the growth boundary that gets approached to the county first should be redirected right back to the municipal. That's the reason that's there. So when that occurs and it goes before the MPC, it's not a rubber stamp, but it's pretty darn close to on an annexation. Where you need to be concerned is the zoning in that aspect. And you're absolutely right. That was the original premise for that, and the reason that information was put into that document, and the way it was supposed to work in that way, in that aspect. Annexation had slowed down some aspect, but we all want those donut holes to go away. And there are a bunch of them out there on both sides of the house. And we need them to go away. So,
well, just from a responsible land use standpoint, thickening up the urban centers and then providing really great connectivity at the same time, trying to, keep this green belt, this rural green belt around us is the most responsible way that we manage the growth that's coming, right? This urban sprawl model that we've been hooked on for the last 50 or 60 years, if you look around the country, is not a recipe for success, right? From a financial standpoint, from a sitting in traffic from so many different, there's so many different reasons on why we have to follow what was put in the Northern Regional Plan and continue to sort of move towards those goals. All right, get off my soapbox, sorry.
nope.
You didn't use sustainability, I'm proud of you.
Primed them a little bit.
Well, I think we've got a document we followed for so long. But as anything else that we have to update it. So I think it's time that we brought it back to the table. Let's look at it, redo it, and let's do what's in the best interest now, because what was in the best interest then might not be what it is today. And I think that's pretty much what you're trying to say, too, a lot of, we've got to redo it, and we've got to look at what we really need.
Essentially, yeah, and it also the document is good, and I just think so much time has gone by. To your point, so much time has gone by. We've sort of forgotten some of the strategies in the book, and so county council is going to have 30% turnover come January. We're going to have one new council member, maybe two in December.
One.
Hey, well, thank you, Michael.
Mr. McKee's going to run. The point is, you got new leadership all around the table that, these things are important, and there was a lot of thoughtfulness that went into that plan.
And besides us and the elected officials, there's 3 new planning directors since that document. None of the planning directors. It was Tony Crisatello, Libby Anderson, and
David.
Linda.
I cannot believe I just drew Linda a blank on Linda.
Rockstar Linda.
Sorry.
She did.
Yeah, I sort of said it. Yeah. So that's another aspect, because there was a lot of conversation that happened between the 3 of them all the time also, and especially before we presented. I know, again, as chair for so many years, that the conversations they were having the week leading up to them on, who's going to go first, who's going to go second, why, what makes sense, who's presenting what aspect according to the projects. That a lot of that occurred in preparation for those meetings. We used to move the meeting around in the beginning. You know, we had it sometimes here, sometimes at City Hall. We moved it to your location because the room worked better in just that aspect. It was a better room than what we were doing here, especially when like Whitehall and other things were coming with 300 people coming to present to us and talk about those things. So that's another aspect. We've also got to engage the planning directors and say, you know, obviously we got to make the final decision. That's our jobs. But I think we need to hear from them and what their thoughts are.
Absolutely. And so that's a good, we are looking for a planning director, so if you know any rock stars, form-based code and historic preservation experience.
Ours is real solid where he is, don't bother making the call.
Where's Noah?
We asked him not to come tonight.
We made sure he wasn't here tonight.
Noticing the regional absence of Noah.
There was a reason.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the annexation wars.
Yes.
It was terrible.
Really, yeah.
And I can tell you that I was extremely happy when we did pass the Northern Region Plan, because it made our answers very easy. Somebody showing up at our doorstep saying, hey, I put a property out near Snake Road, and be like, nope, sorry, it's not within our growth boundary. It made our lives a heck of a lot easier. So.
And even after all this time, I don't see where those boundaries need to change at this point. I don't have that, thought in my head at this point in any of those boundaries. I mean, there's tweaks to the line I'd love to see, but in a larger scale, the boundaries are still pretty solid. Still a lot to do inside that boundary to do urban development.
We worked together on a both growth boundary line modification about 10 years ago.
We did.
Well, the future service delivery map between the city and the town is very intuitive. Takes into account making sure that people on either side of the road are not split between jurisdictions. It goes on back lot lines, and it's a very good, solid document that we just kind of closed up one side of it on 170 recently.
Yep.
And it is a baby step process. It takes a long time to do this, but with thoughtfulness and good teamwork moving forward, I'm sure the city and the town can continue to really closing the donut holes and bring good service to the community that they deserve. Trash being one of the big conversations.
Yep. Well, all right. Well, last item is miscellaneous. Open to any council member or mayor happen to be sitting around this table would like to talk about anything. Gentlemen?
Yeah, there's something I'd like to talk about. I kind of struggled with putting it in the miscellaneous category, but I know. And that's homelessness. In the area. I've got a lot of calls about it, folks complaining about folks who are homeless, nowhere to stay, and apparently no one caring. And I've talked with Stephen and my fellow council members and staff about it. Maybe that's something that needs to be talked about regionally. When I first came on board, well, before I came on board, what I was hearing is that, they were being shuffled from one place to the other, put in jail for a night here or whatever, and then actually put in a police car or a sheriff cruiser and shipped to Ridgeland or whatever. I was never able to substantiate that, but it doesn't really matter. Other places I've lived, much larger cities, of course, had homeless shelters. And I sense that there's a concern that if you build a homeless shelter in Beaufort, or if you build it in Port Royal, we're going to have all the homeless people in this locality, or whichever locality the physical structure is. Which tells me that maybe it's something that needs to be talked about from a joint perspective, including, other counties, even, like Hampton, whatever, Colleton, and so forth. Because it kind of, I don't have a good answer when someone tells me about the homeless person that's sitting on whatever street, and what are you doing about it? I really don't have a good answer, except that I would talk to my colleagues about it. And I just leave that conversation kind of empty, if you will.
I think you're right. It's a conversation that we've spent some time, like everybody, we've had some issues and we've really talked about it internally. Our police chief has been heavily involved with talking with me about what we can and what we can't do. And I've talked to some of the churches and religious leaders in the area that have stepped forward at times to deal with things. And you're absolutely right. It's not a city or a Port Royal thing. This is a regional issue that has to be dealt with in a regional manner. It's also interesting if you look at the bigger cities, and I've done some reading about this, and the cities that have had to pass ordinances to say, nobody wants to arrest somebody that's sleeping on the street, especially if that's something, but have had to go down that path because they got empty beds in the shelters and they don't want to go to the shelters. So the ordinances that a lot of these cities have passed is, if there is an empty bed, you must take it or you go to jail. And again, that's a tough situation for somebody who chooses to be on the street, because when you really start talking to a lot of them, it is the choice that they've made, and that becomes the difficult thing to do. We believe they deserve better, and I believe they deserve better. They deserve a warm bed, they deserve a meal, they deserve some place to go if that's what they, but when they say, I don't want to, Mitch, that's where I get into it. And that's when we need the experts. That's when you need the regional experts that know how to work with them, know how to deal with it, and move things forward. So I think you're right, that is a regional, and maybe that's a good local thing. Maybe that's something to take on in that aspect if we bring this county together and then we bring in some of the other ones. That's a great conversation.
But what organization here locally is actually counting them? My former employee before I came to the job that I'm in right now, and annually they have the point in time count, which is normally done in January. We went out at midnight in September, and we went out into Hardyville, Ridgeland, and we counted the homeless. And then the point in time is taken every January, and that's reported and we presented to Jasper County Council, because there's federal dollars that comes in regards, but I don't know of anyone here in Beaufort County that
they do, and so I do want to give the thanks to the county's leadership. They funded in last year's budget, this is the wrong name, homeless coordinator, someone who works for their human services department that was just recently hired within a few months ago. And I think the idea was that person will go out, kind of find the gaps in the resources.
Nice.
And then report back in some regional way of how we might be able to fill some of those gaps. They also, Fred Lida's office, they do the Everyone Counts once a year.
Yeah, and actually Michael Haskin over at the Veterans Affair, he goes out and also and he identifies those people that may have had military experience, because they have a program to get them off the street as well.
And then we just found out last week that the homeless initiative in Charleston
and Savannah
gets a significant amount of money from the feds for Beaufort County.
What?
It's called the continuum of care.
Continuum of care.
And they were told that there were only 6 homeless people in Beaufort County.
Yes.
So we found that last week. We've got a contact, and so one of our goals is to make contact with those folks. But Joe, you're exactly right. I mean, I've gone down and talked to a number of our homeless folks, and I think it's the shelter-resistant population. And just because there's a bed, so, free will, they can, the Ninth Circuit Court has ruled that they can sleep in parks and they can panhandle civilly. And so there's, from a law enforcement standpoint, there's limited things that we can do. Councilman Lipsitz went to the Rooms of Grace banquet last week, and so a guy named Jay Turner and Stephanie Green, supported by Praise Assembly, the old Galloway Funeral Home in Seabrook, they've opened a shelter there. It's for men, single men, but you got to be in a recovery program. They help you get your driver's license, help you get a job, and they've got some really great success stories that's coming out of that facility. Additionally, we have a recovery house for females and for males in our area. But anecdotally, I talked to one of our female homeless folks in the park, and she said, I'm ready for some help. And I said, okay, I'll make a phone call and we'll get you some help. And she said, well, who are you calling? I said, well, I'm going to call this facility over here. It's a recovery house. Well, I can't go there. I said, well, why can't you go there? Well, I've already been there, and they won't let me bring my knife in, and they won't let me drink there. I said, well, it's a recovery house, and I said, well, I'm not ready for that yet. So I also tell folks downtown, because I've had business owners call me about the homeless issue. When you give homeless folks money or you give them food, you're enabling the bad behavior. Right? This isn't to say that our resources are perfectly aligned and they are as robust as they need to be, but there are resources available. And so when some of folks, all their daily needs are being met, right, by the generosity, and I'm guilty of it too, of giving $1 or giving food or giving rides. When those daily needs are being met, there's no incentive for them to go get help. And so if you want to help, donate to Rooms of Grace, donate to one of these recovery houses, offer to connect them to resources.
Just to be clear, I hear, and surely I think I heard on NPR some time ago that Salt Lake City had probably been most successful as a large city in trying to rid their homeless, and even they didn't do it all because, as you said, some folks prefer to be out in the open. They don't want to be in a closed space. I don't get the castle, right? But there are a lot of folks who aren't in that situation. So if we could have a situation or a place where you could take care of those who are receptive to needs, they'll need far less on the street who don't want to be in the shelter. So I think we focus on those because if you don't have a place that they could go, it's hard to say who would go, right? We don't really know. And a lot of these folks have mental challenges where maybe resident in those buildings could be the kind of help they need. And those are the folks I'm thinking of because I realize that some folks are not going to go and they're not going to stay, but at least we could help those that are receptive to it.
I agree. The only benefit that I have found when people have told me about a homeless person in the area is that when I have been lucky enough to be able to reach out to our police department, they've been able to give me a lot of information about the person. And we know who they are, they check on them, they do the things that you would think would be good. So when I call the person back, I get at least be able to tell them this is a choice they've made. Or it's not a choice and we're helping in this way. So at least that's the only thing that I've been able to do in that aspect. And it seems to help when people call about it and are concerned about it, that they know that we're aware of them, we monitor, we look for them, we help them when they need the help. But a lot of times they have to ask for it or try to find it in that way. I think it's a conversation that really needs to go on. Bring the county into this one clearly and get to meet the new person in that way and maybe present to us at our next joint meeting, if that's not too far away. Go ahead, Kevin.
Are you seeing the increase? Do you think it's more people that are in the community already recently becoming homeless, whether for financial reasons or family kicks them out, or is it people homeless migrating here?
What I just see is some of the same folks, we all see probably walking the streets, some of the same folks.
Yeah.
And then the calls I get, are people that I've kind of been made aware of. Yeah. And I think what kind of prompted me to make a comment here is that I didn't think I have a good response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For them, they're expecting something, they call them their councilmen. And
that's why I added a little bit of response that I have found that seems to meet some people's
In your
needs.
jurisdiction also, you have on Duke Street Bostics.
Pardon me?
Right across from DSS Bostics. That's the.
Oh, yes.
They have it.
That's good. I don't know about that one.
I do two things in the morning. I read the police reports and I check the inmate inquiry. And the number of homeless that are being arrested is increasing.
It is increasing?
A lot of trespassing, things like that. So those numbers are trending in that direction.
Let's not get off this conversation. And a lot of what Councilman Mitchell has come to be aware of is people that are transitionally homeless. They're barely getting by, they're about to lose their rent, or they're making it in a hotel for a few nights, or they're sleeping on somebody's couch. But if you're rent stressed right now and you don't think you're going to be able to make your rent, SC Stay has a program that is putting better than 3 months worth of rent in people's pocket just from filling out a little bit of paperwork.
Yes.
Beaufort Housing Authority can point you in the right direction. It's on the county's website, it's on the City of Beaufort's website, and it's out there. So if you're watching on Facebook and you need that help, it is available. The right now thing that we can do is make sure that when the Low Country Homeless Coalition and the consortium is counting, that they do get counted accurately, that we'll put vouchers in BHA's hands, that on the night somebody's homeless, they get a voucher to go stay in a hotel for an extended period of time to get back on their feet, and then hopefully transition into some newly available affordable housing.
Appreciate that.
And Beaufort Housing also notified us at that meeting that they get priority, the homeless, for that short-term stay. So they move ahead of that 1,400 list. So they have it. So, again, we were surprised to find out about that consortium, and we'll be getting some information on that.
Anything else?
Revo Road, the county, Alice or Eric, you want to jump in? I know the county just approved out of committee to hire Stantec to do the whole
Reimagine.
all of Reboat Road.
Re-envisioning Reboat, I think is what it's officially called, is that correct? Yeah.
Candidly, it was a little bit of a surprise to us, so certainly major transportation corridor through the heart of our city, and
Me too, Mayor.
so we're excited about it, and
Yeah.
it's on our capital plan, and you guys have heard me ramble about making sure we can get as much engineering and design and local match money as fast as we can right now in advance of going and pulling down state and federal monies that are being printed in DC as we speak. And so that'll, I think, put us in a competitive stance. But just, curious what you guys know and about process and timing and just thoughts, just to put it on the table.
About as much as you. So I just recently found out as well. And the thought was, is Jared going to be leading that? Yeah. So I just had a conversation today with somebody about it's time for a meeting, and I'll definitely invite you as well, Mayor, to sit down with Jared and say, okay, where are we going, how are we doing this, in that aspect. What committee is going to be monitoring Stantec, what's going to be reviewing that aspect. So plan on getting some follow-up from me in that.
And y'all had stood up a while back a redevelopment group, right, to look at pieces of...
Two different things. We
Okay.
stood up two different things in that aspect. We redid our redevelopment commission. It was just time to take a look at that, and we have them focused on the Reboat Road Corridor, bridge to Burger King as we describe it. And then we did a smaller commission along with 303 Associates to take a look at some possible redevelopment options for a few pieces of property, and then we're turning that over to the redevelopment commission.
Well, it started out as an intersection study.
Correct.
Then we expanded it to a corridor.
To a corridor
review,
study.
just to get a feel for what we could have realistic expectations here is based upon traffic counts and socioeconomic demographic information.
Yeah.
That combined with the study we did on our own traffic concerns.
The tools.
We wanted to be out in front of the eventual study of Rebo so that we could work those things into whatever that document ends up being.
Yeah, so.
But not specific to Rebo, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the county's position at this point appears to be trying to get as much possible with the money that we have in a design level, so that the opportunity for leveraging grants is really the direction that we're going to try to maximize that capability.
Yeah. Told you we'd get to the table. That's twice now.
So we have chosen, in light of what county council did with the transportation referendum, we had to refocus our efforts on transportation issues to put us in a position to either get federal money, additional state money, or to be ready in '24 to do a transportation referendum potentially with the pennies. So we are focusing on 4 or 5 areas of the county, and we're spending money to do planning work on those areas. Rebo Road is one of those areas. How do we, in addition to doing Rebo Road, the McTier Bridge, all of that, how do we deal with those areas with the existing money that we have and get an appropriate design for that? 170 is a key corridor that we're focusing money on, that we're working with LCOG, LATS to try to get them to free up some planning money to plan that corridor. We're focusing our attention on what we call the triangle, which is the 170 Argent 278 intersections through Hardyville, doing some design work there, and then on further down 170 in Bluffton on how we deal with transportation in some of those key areas, and the road that we're working on there escapes me right now. But we're doing
towards Riverside.
Do what
Going
now?
towards the new Riverside.
Yeah, going toward the new Riverside. So we're planning to do that and start some design work on those areas once we get the plans in place, so that we're ready to take advantage of those grant opportunities, infrastructure money that's out there, and also to be ready to go whenever we do a penny in '24, hopefully, if we're successful on that. One of the things we keep hearing, and I keep trying to stress is that transportation issues from the 2018 penny are by and large political issues that are holding us back from really being able to do anything. And I get that political issues, sometimes play a role in advancing projects. But we can't move forward on 278 by and large because of political issues. Can't move forward on Sea Island Parkway on Ladies Island by and large for political issues, because every option we come up with in those areas, we've got a group that is against it and coming to our body and saying, hey, we don't want this to our neighborhood, or we don't want this road to be 4-lane, things like that. So it's really difficult from a transportation standpoint. So hopefully if we get some of this planning work done now, get some of the design work done now, we can have the public input meetings so that whenever we do, if we are successful in 24 with a penny sales tax, we can hit the ground running on those projects to go ahead and start getting some construction underway right away. So that's kind of the mindset and the philosophy behind it. So.
I appreciate that, and I think that's the right way to go. And from the perspective of Rebo Road, our section of Rebo Road, we're not looking to move cars faster. We're looking to create a more friendly urban environment.
Right.
So you don't have to worry about widening, you don't have to worry about new lanes, you don't have to worry about that aspect from our perspective. We're looking for a safer, more urban development environment to bring together, both sides of the road, the connectivity in that aspect. And I think that the city might agree with that on their section as well.
Absolutely. I think that's the city's position. I mean, and in terms of Ladies Island, I hate the politics that are involved in it, but folks still complain to me about Boundary Street, and I stand by that it's a safer, more attractive road that functions more efficiently than it did in its prior format. Last time we checked, accidents were down 20+% on that roadway, and we've seen $30–40 million worth of redevelopment that's beginning to occur along the corridor. In terms of Ladies Island, I'd just say the Ladies Island plan was something that we all worked on together, the county, Port Royal, the city, Sea Island Corridor Coalition, Coastal Conservation League. There were a lot of folks at the table. And I think Ladies Island plan, which we all endorsed, sort of called for those same things along that corridor. So I just say, lean back on the plans because there was consensus with residents back then that this was where we wanted to go.
I have a question. So are we going forward with the 4-laning of Ladies Island, to the bridge? Pardon me?
To the bridge, right?
To the bridge.
To Salem.
Bridge to bridge.
I mean, is it going to be 4-lane to the bridge?
So what has happened is we have proposed 4 options to the Public Facilities Committee and to the County Council with regards to implementing the transportation network on Ladies Island. It all basically boils down to 2 points of intersection that stalls traffic or has potential stalling traffic. One is Beaufort High School access. The other one is Sunset Road connection to Sea Island Parkway. So we've proposed several solutions or potential concepts to designing transportation in those 2 areas. With regards to the Beaufort High School access, I think we have 4 or 5 options that we've laid out there. All of those have been rejected by various interest groups over there. So when we went to the Public Facilities Committee in August, we told them, look, here are all the options. You guys have seen all these options. You've basically rejected all the options. The only other option that we can suggest to you is that you consider making Sea Island Parkway a 4-lane road, because if you do any of those other things regarding the Beaufort High School access, you either have to go down Meridian Road. Folks that live on Meridian do not want that. We had a proposal to go through the Gray's shopping center area and line that intersection up with Sunset, put the signal there. Folks did not like that. It was cost prohibitive as well to do that. We got pushback on that. The latest proposal that we took to council, 4A and 4B, was to extend the existing access plat past the Beaufort High School and come around by Crystal Lake Park through the Catholic Church property. The Catholic Church opposed that, and so did a lot of folks that love Crystal Lake Park. So we're essentially out of options. So council needs to tell us what we want to do. There was a motion made at that public facilities meeting for us to go forward with the design of a 4-lane section on Sea Island Parkway. I do not think that that will stand the test of time. I think there will be some additional modifications to that proposal because there's a lot of opposition to that, even though we don't have a design and we don't know what that's going to look like right now. People have latched onto this idea of a solid median down through that corridor. That is not the case. It was never a plan. I think there was a drawing many, many years ago that I saw that showed that, but it was just a conceptual drawing. And once you get into the design details, you start refining those types of things. So the answer to your question is yes, there was a vote and a recommendation to continue with the design of a 4-lane section, but there's also some pressure now being exerted on the political process once again to roll back that decision and change that decision. So I don't know where we'll end up. Professionally, I think it's possible for us to do a 4-lane section that's walkable. Coleman Boulevard in Mount Pleasant is much like that. Folks are saying they don't want Ladies Island to be Mount Pleasant, but that section of Mount Pleasant where there's a 4-lane section with on-street parking and very walkable gives the feel and has the design of what I think the Ladies Island plan calls for. So you're looking at a large investment on any of those other networks. I'm sorry I'm being long-winded
No,
here,
you're
but
good.
there's a lot of complications to this. On all those other options, it's about a $15 million investment to move 2,000 trips off of Sea Island Parkway a day outside of the school traffic. The transportation planners, engineer planners told us that if we do a 4-lane section of Sea Island Parkway through that same area, then the Beaufort High School access issue goes away because you can handle a lot more traffic in that corridor without doing any of the internal road network past the high school or hitting any of the other roads on that area. We can still do the Hazel Farm connection over to the middle school, and that's still on the plan. We at the staff level, we've done everything we can do. We've got 4 sides where we can put roads, and all 4 sides have been rejected. So I'm at a loss. So I need some political guidance and leadership to tell us what they want us to do.
Eric, is it my understanding that that'll be discussed on Monday?
It will not. That was a little misinformation. I think it will come back to the public facilities meeting in September.
Okay.
But it will
The
not
vice
be
chair
on,
had sent
it
out
will
an
not
email
be
saying
on
it
the
was coming
agenda.
back?
You are correct. There was some emails sent to say staff was instructed to come back on the 12th with some design options. First of all, you can't do design options that quickly, and that wasn't a part of the motion. So.
You need to expedite the Japanese flying car operation.
That's it. That'll
Very
solve
time.
it.
How many flying cars, $40 million ago?
Well, that whole corridor, if I might, Port Royal needs to pay attention to that as well, because that regional transportation network there, if we don't, folks are saying, well, take as many of those cars off of Sea Island Parkway between Publix and the Woods Memorial Bridge as possible, and don't make it easy to go through there. Well, guess where they go?
No, we know where they go. We don't have to guess. We already know where they go. We're very familiar with where every single one of
Yeah,
those
they like that hour wait now.
Right, yeah.
Well, they're only coming across 1 or 2 bridges, but I'll go back to the Ladies Island plan. And why I think it's so important is that, again, we tend to look at these things through a silver bullet approach. The transportation infrastructure is what's going to save Ladies Island. It's deeper than that, right? And something we haven't executed in the Ladies Island plan is the village master plan, right, that really looks at that entire area, and instead of it being politically made decisions, it's based on vision of what residents want on that area, but also from a planning standpoint of what makes the most sense long-term. And, you know, I'm in favor of more businesses and more density of commercial along the corridor because I think it keeps people from having to cross bridges. And some of you heard me say this before, but I've got a friend on Distant Island who was adamantly opposed to the Walmart, right, and came into MPC meetings, and he was adamantly opposed to Whitehall. And 6 or so months ago, he said, a light bulb went off when I left Distant Island. I went to the Walmart and got my shopping. I went to Bill's and got, stuff for the party that night. I went by a restaurant, and I went by Verizon or T-Mobile and got my cell phone fixed. And he said, and I realized that I got to do all of my daily services without ever having to cross a bridge. And he said, I want more of that.
Right.
And so from a planning standpoint, it's not just about concrete and, how do we move cars faster?
It's not that.
Right. It's how do we create a real sort of downtown ladies island that people are proud of that also helps us reduce car trips over those two bridges.
I completely agree.
Service delivery.
And today at the neighborhood meeting, we talked about the new auto parts store that's coming to Ladies Island up first.
Are they closing this up?
Yeah, the auto parts store. As you think now, they got to come across the McTier Bridge, the Advance.
No, that's terrible.
That's a big piece of.
It's a terrible intersection.
It's a tough one to get in and out of.
Very tough.
But now they'll be able to stay right there on Ladies Island and go to the auto parts store.
And we can stay right here for our hardware, because Ace Hardware opened up on Saturday morning.
Yes. Awesome, too.
Lots of bolts.
I was, yes, I bought out some of that stuff on Saturday morning. I was there when the door.
Don't forget about Greco.
Greco.
Greco's been here supporting our community forever.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and I've supported
Don't
them.
forget that.
My favorite place.
Those Ladies Island people know about Graco.
We all know about Greco.
Anything else, miscellaneous
Speaking for the
wise?
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming. Great conversation, as always. I enjoy these meetings very much.
Take a chicken wing.
Everybody, please come to Guys. Everybody come to Guys and Dolls.
Alice, thank you.
Come to
Ian,
Guys and Dolls.
anything you'd like to add, Ian? I mean,
I would just applaud everything that was said earlier about housing. As if a switch has flipped in the past couple of months, every conversation I'm having with business owners, from small to large in the region, if they've made an offer, they are having trouble landing the person, whether they're within our region or coming from outside, because they simply cannot even find available housing. So we have an affordability problem, and from homelessness to 30% of median income to 60% of median income, 100% of median income and above. It's a comprehensive housing problem that I echo every statement made around the table. There is no silver bullet, and we look forward to being a partner in helping address that over a long time, because I know it's going to take a lot of work.
Thank you. Mayor, anything you want to close with?
No, really appreciate you guys hosting. Who cooked, Van? Was it you?
That's good.
Yes, I did.
It was delicious.
Very good salmon.
Thank you, guys.
Yes,
Thank you for
catering did a
thank you
great
for
job.
service.
Sorry we
Thank
didn't
you.
have pecan
Thank
pie.
you.
And I don't forgive you. It's been great working with y'all. I'll still be around.
We'll see you around. We'll see you.
But I'm counting down.
Go ahead and end it.